Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Here we are getting you your weekly dose of major international news with a perspective. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you those reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Pakistan-India launched Visa Pact. Interior Minister Rahman Malik mentions terror equates 26/11 with Babri Masjid demolition. Russia does a flip-flop on its stand on Syrian conflict, admits for the first time Assad's time is nearly up. Protests erupt across Japan after Japan accuses China of violating its airspace near disputed East China Sea islands. And team boss Norbert Hawk to step down as Mercedes-Benz head ends two-decade career on the back of poor showing. And straight to the story in focus this week, India and Pakistan on Friday formally operationalized a new visa agreement that would facilitate multiple entry and reporting free visas for businessmen, besides allowing visa on arrival for the elderly. The visa announcement was made after talks between Malik and Indian Home Minister Sushil Kumar Shinde shortly after the former began a three-day visit to India. This new agreement would facilitate multiple entry and reporting free visas for businessmen, as we mentioned, and by that they can visit 5 cities now instead of 3 as per the older system. But Rahman Malik's visit wasn't just about this. Over the next few minutes, we will try and talk about the larger implications of his visit to India and other contentious issues that were raised, like terror, apart from trade. I'm pleased to welcome Professor Kamal Mitra Chinoy of the Jawaharlal Nehru University this week on the show with me. Welcome to the show, sir. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we get his perspective, a look at this report. Highlighting the essence of proactive people-to-people contact with India, the visiting Interior Minister of Pakistan, Rahman Malik, asserted that the journey towards peace is progressing on right tracks.
Our, journey towards peace is progressing very well because of the interaction of the two governments. And now, especially with the visa regime, with the policy, when the people will interact, I think it will also bring a lot of good for us.
We are jointly operationalizing the new visa agreement today. We have completed the required formalities for implementing the agreement and have issued a circular to all our missions and the post abroad, the state governments and also union territory administrations.
With the easing of visa restrictions, Pakistani tourists and business travelers will be able to visit the neighboring country. He stated this while interacting with the media after his arrival in New Delhi on Friday on a 3-day visit. Further, Malik mentioned that Pakistan has been the victim of terror too and has always condemned acts of militancy.
We have lost 40,000 innocent people. 42,000 have become almost, handicapped. So this thing has brought a lot of grief for us. So we know the touch of terrorism. First of all, I would like to offer my condolences to the families who had suffered.
Relations have warmed since Pakistan promised India the most favored nation status last year, although a 10 million bounty offered by Washington for Hafiz Saeed for 2008 attacks on Mumbai has stirred old grievances. New Delhi is furious at Islamabad since it has not detained Hafiz Saeed, a suspected mastermind of the attack, despite handing over evidence against him.
I will make the official documents public, documents from the court's judgments where Hafiz Saeed has been declared like innocent. I again, while sitting here in India, I assure you that we're still investigating, but if there is an evidence, and that evidence even is scrutinized by the media, and which can which can stand the test of the courts, the law at international standard. I assure you, we have no love lost for Hafiz Saeed. If I get the information today before I leave, I rest assure you, if I have evidence before I leave, I'll order the arrest.
India has eagerly welcomed the visit of Malik and is likely to raise several allied issues during the ministerial and delegation level parleys. And after that, let me now turn my attention to Professor Chinoy. Sir, you've seen the new visa agreement, the changes that have come about, aimed towards improving people-to-people contacts between the two nations. But on the ground, really, how much difference would these changes make?
Well, there was supposed to be a visa-friendly bus service from Srinagar to Muzaffarabad.
Right.
But it's become so tedious that people from Kashmir are coming to Delhi and taking the bus to Lahore. So the real strength of this visa regime would lie in how effective it is. And we must remember businessmen are important, but for people-to-people friendship, you need many more than businessmen. Students, teachers, ordinary people like, who come as tourists.
Right.
Just businessmen coming is not going to improve substantially visa qualifications for the bulk of the Pakistani people, nor will they really improve people-to-people relations.
Right. And also, the clauses like people who are 65 years or elder to that, they have been given a free, right to move to and fro across the border. So really not a very drastic change, do you feel? And many also feel that, Rehman Malik does not have that much authority because obviously people know that it's the, ISI calling the shots. So what does really Rehman Malik's visit at this point in time really mean? If we talk about the bigger picture here.
Well, I think it's not a very big step, but every step is welcome. And we are inured to the reality that ISI and army play a disproportionate role inside Pakistan and in their policies outside. So we have to expect strange comments. Like, for example, on the Babri Masjid, on which commission of inquiry finished after 17 years.
Right.
Now, where has there been a similar commission of inquiry against those who attacked Mumbai? So I think there is a problem in the Pakistan establishment on just how much to concede, because they're scared if they concede too much, their own image in the world community may go down if they're found guilty of participation in terrorism in Mumbai.
Right. Also, a strange thing that one could perhaps point out in Rehman Malik's visit as of now was the fact that though he was talking about moving ahead, forgetting the past, but he did not refrain from mentioning the past, time and again. So does it give a signal that, Pakistani establishment, in particular, the message that Rehman Malik brings it's kind of hazy, it's just not clear?
The major issues between the two countries, like Kashmir, like the border near Siachen Glacier, which according to the Pakistanis should go up to the Karakoram Pass, according to the Indians should go to the Chinese border.
Right.
The Sir Creek dispute, where Pakistan is asking for a boundary which is not known commonly in international law. So these are all issues which are not being resolved. And of course the old issues like Mumbai, new issue about the alleged torture of Captain Kalia during the Kargil War. So there are many issues which need to be resolved, and at the pace at which Pakistan is offering solutions, it would take a long time to resolve, and that would not strengthen the peace process.
Okay. You've talked about some of the other issues that are making headlines these days, at least back at home, the case of Captain Saurabh Kalia's death, then how Rehman Malik also talked about Hafiz Saeed, how there's not enough evidence. India has been asking Pakistan time and again to do something about Hafiz Saeed. They have enough evidence, but now Pakistan has been maintaining a stand that, what Kasab said really doesn't matter, that evidence is simply not enough. So nothing really has changed from Pakistan's side, no matter how much India tries to push.
Well, it's unfortunate that Kasab died because he was a living proof. And Mr. Rehman Malik has very cleverly distinguished between information and evidence, and said what India has provided is information, not evidence. Now, if these kind of smart lawyer tricks are played, it's going to be difficult to resolve problems, Because then India can say for problems that worry Pakistan, that you've given us information but no evidence.
Right.
So I think it's a holistic problem in Pakistan, the way the courts function, how Hafiz Saeed has been speaking openly on TV, though he is a person accused of serious crimes not only by India, but also by the United States and other countries.
Right. Lastly, to conclude, now Rahman Malik has given out feelers that he will be inviting Dr. Manmohan Singh over to Pakistan next year. Now, Dr. Manmohan Singh might just go to Pakistan next year, but the point is, where does this all lead to? Because if there's no cooperation as such, then what are these meetings really going to yield?
Well, it's better to talk than war. But what can Dr. Manmohan Singh say to Pakistan which would make it more reasonable? I mean, after all, India is not going to say that we cede Kashmir to Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And the Kashmiris don't want that either. So, there has to be a new atmosphere where there's some straight talking and an ability to make major concessions in the interest of an enduring peace.
Right.
And that kind of commitment we have not yet seen from the Pakistani side.
Right.
And unless we see that, there's not much any Indian Prime Minister can do.
Right. So the main goal for these two nations is, as you mentioned, create that atmosphere where steps like these, like the visa regime, can actually bring some benefit on the ground to both these nations, and the peace process can really move forward instead of just, stalling because of some major issues that these countries are facing now. Small steps at a time, perhaps. Thank you so much, Professor Chinoy, for joining me on the show this week and sharing your perspective. We'll take a very quick break now, but North Korea faces international condemnation for the controversial missile launch. We'll get you a detailed report after this short break. Thanks for staying with us. Now, in what could prove to be a turning point in Syria, its most powerful ally, Russia, said for the first time that President Bashar al-Assad is losing control of his country and the rebels might win the civil war, dramatically shifting the diplomatic landscape at a time of enormous momentum for the opposition. But then came a U-turn. Here are the details. Although Moscow did not rule out that the opposition in Syria could eventually come to power, in a later statement, Russia said it will not change its position on the Syria issue.
Russia didn't and won't change its position on the Syrian issue. The remark by Bogdanov only indicates that the overall situation in Syria is tense, but it does not mean that Russia has changed its position.
Meanwhile, facing popular revolts, the authoritarian Assad regime reportedly launched Scud missiles against the rebel-held target areas in northern parts of the country. The White House refrained from confirming it, but termed it as a desperate attempt.
As the regime becomes more and more desperate, we see it resorting to increased lethality and more vicious weapons moving forward. And we have in recent days seen missiles deployed.
This a day after US President Barack Obama had announced his decision to recognize the Syrian opposition coalition as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people.
Today, the United States has taken an important step forward. We now recognize the Syrian Opposition Council as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. We have extended an invitation to Muaz al-Khatib and the coalition leadership to visit Washington at their earliest opportunity.
Western and Arab nations, sympathetic to Syria's nearly 20-month uprising against Assad, gave full political recognition on Wednesday to the opposition, reflecting a hardening consensus that the uprising might be nearing a tipping point. Meeting in the Moroccan city of Marrakech, as rebels battled Assad's troops on the outskirts of his Damascus power base, the group urged for action over intention. Japan has accused China of violating its airspace for the first time after a Chinese plane flew near disputed East China Sea islands. Smaller Asian countries have also become increasingly worried about Beijing's growing military assertiveness and the brewing tensions between the two countries over the disputed islands in the South China Sea.
In an incident that has further fueled tensions between Tokyo and Beijing, a Chinese government airplane was allegedly spotted near the disputed Senkaku Islands. As a countermeasure, Japan's military scrambled 8 F-15 fighter jets and diverted 2 in addition to a radar and surveillance plane to safeguard its territory.
The Japanese Air Self-Defense Force diverted 2 F-15 fighters on patrol to the area around the Senkaku Islands to deal with airspace intrusions.
Japan also lodged a formal protest later in the day, but China brushed it off, saying it was merely carrying out a normal operation.
The fact that intrusions into our waters have continued to take place, and on top of that, now this airspace intrusion has happened, is extremely regrettable. The Foreign Ministry's Under-Secretary has summoned the Chinese ambassador in Tokyo and voiced protests.
The Diaoyu Islands and the affiliated islands have been part of China's territory since antiquity. China's surveillance plane flying in aerospace over Diaoyu Islands is completely normal. China calls on Japan to halt illegal activities in waters around the Diaoyu Islands and aerospace.
Sino-Japanese relations touched a new low in September, when the Japanese government purchased a set of disputed islands from a private owner. Chinese and Japanese ships have been involved in a daily cat-and-mouse chase around the islands, but analysts say the latest incident threatens to escalate the territorial spat to a whole new level.
Defying international warnings, North Korea fired a long-range rocket on Wednesday, the second launch under its new leader, and a clear sign Pyongyang is pushing forward with its quest to develop the technology needed to deliver a nuclear warhead. Now, US, Japan, China, and even India have come out strongly against the launch, calling it provocative and irresponsible measure which infringes the UNSC resolutions. Here's more.
Ignoring global and UN warnings, North Korea fired a long-range rocket Wednesday, only 2 days after extending the launch window, citing technical snags. Various news reports from China, Japan and South Korea said the Unha-3 rocket was fired shortly before 10 a.m. local time from the launching site on North Korea's west coast. The North Koreans celebrated their country's controversial rocket launch, even though the North's only major diplomatic ally, China, had urged it not to go ahead with the launch. Washington condemned Wednesday's launch as a provocative action and a breach of UN rules, while Japan's UN envoy called for a Security Council meeting.
We express regret over North Korea's launch, which took place in a climate in which international community was expressing concern. China has always advocated dialogue and negotiation as the fundamental means of attaining long-lasting peace and stability on the Korean peninsula.
India expresses its concern at the launch of a rocket by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in violation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1874. This unwarranted action by the government of DPRK has adversely impacted on peace and stability in the Korean peninsula. India calls on the DPRK to refrain from such actions.
About 100 conservative South Koreans urged the United Nations and the international community to step up pressure and sanctions on North Korea. The rocket, which North Korea says was designed to put a weather satellite into orbit, is seen by the United States, South Korea and Japan as a test of technology that could one day deliver a nuclear warhead capable of hitting targets as far as the US. North Korea is banned from conducting missile and nuclear-related tests under UN sanctions imposed after its 2006 and 2009 nuclear tests.
Another short breather. After that, as the holiday season kicks in, it's showtime for big budget movies. Catch all the entertainment action on the other side. Thanks for staying with us. Time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
20 school children were slaughtered by a heavily armed gunman who opened fire at a suburban elementary school in Connecticut on Friday, killing at least 27 people, including himself, in one of the worst mass shootings in the US history. The 20-year-old gunman, who law enforcement sources identified as Adam Lanza, opened fire on a classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, which serves children from ages 5 to 10. Authorities found 18 children and 7 adults, including the gunman, dead at the school, and 2 children were pronounced dead later after being taken to a hospital. Another adult was found dead at a related crime scene in Newtown, bringing the toll to 28. Hundreds of Palestinians attended a funeral procession on Thursday amid ongoing clashes in the West Bank city of Hebron following the fatal shooting of a Palestinian teenager overnight. Israeli troops shot dead a Palestinian teenager on December 12 in Hebron after the youth threatened them with what appeared to be a pistol. According to the police, the pistol may not have been a real weapon. Greece's Euro partners agreed on Thursday to hand over the next disbursement of the country's bailout loans that will prevent it from going bankrupt and potentially trigger more turmoil in financial markets. The cash-strapped country will get a total of $64 billion between now and March. In return for the money that will see Greece through the winter months, the country had to commit to further austerity measures, including more spending cuts and tax increases. The United States Pacific Command upheld its neutrality in simmering disputes in the South China Sea, but said it would ensure freedom of navigation wherever it is present. US and Filipino officials agreed on an increase in the number of US military ships, aircraft and troops rotating through the Philippines after high-level meetings on December 12 as tensions simmer between China and the Philippines over competing maritime claims.
And if you've missed the week's biggest sporting events, here's your chance to catch up. We bring you all the sports action. During his 3-day visit to Argentina, tennis superstar Roger Federer delighted crowds by playing a much-anticipated friendly match against Argentine tennis João Martin del Potro. The game was played to a sold-out crowd of 20,000 in northern Buenos Aires, suburb of Tigre. Both tennis stars met again to try their hands at a round of soccer tennis at the world-famous Bombonera Stadium, home of Argentina's Boca Juniors. France's Gregory Bourdi shot a 66 on Thursday to lead the Alfred Dunhill Championship by 1 shot. The 30-year-old fired 6 birdies to snatch a 1-shot lead over South African quartet Carl Schwartzel, Oliver Becker, Louis De Jager and Darren Ficard, as well as English pair Richard Bland and Steve Webster. Defending champion Garth Mulroy of South Africa finished on 1 under, while his compatriot Louis Oosthuizen is 1 over. Mercedes Motorsport head Norbert Hogg will leave the company at the end of 2012, the German carmaker said in a statement on Thursday. Mercedes added that its contract will come to an end by mutual agreement with the board of management. Preparations for the forthcoming season will continue as planned. Hogg, who turned 60 last month, has led Mercedes' motorsport division since October 1990 and played a part in signing Britain's 2008 Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton from McLaren for next season. And time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
The red carpet arrival line for the midlife crisis comedy This Is 40 was the subject of endless jokes, good times and the denial of middle age as stars Paul Rudd, Leslie Mann and Megan Fox attended the film's Wednesday night premiere in Los Angeles. Written and directed by Judd Apatow, the movie is a soft sequel to the 2007 romantic comedy Knocked Up. The film opens in the US on December 21st. The star-studded cast of the film version of Les Miserables hit the red carpet in New York on December 10th to celebrate the movie's opening. Based on the long-running stage musical and classical novel by Victor Hugo, the film stars Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Anne Hathaway and Amanda Seyfried. Set against the backdrop of 19th century France, the epic story follows the plight of an ex-convict on the run after breaking his parole. Les Miserables is due to open in the US on Christmas Day. Spice Mania descended on London's Piccadilly Theatre when all 5 original members of the Spice Girls arrived on Tuesday to launch the musical Viva Forever. Jerry Halliwell, Melanie Chrism, Melanie Brown and Emma Bunton arrived without Victoria Beckham, doing interviews, posing for photographs and signing for fans together, while the latter arrived with her husband David Beckham and her kids. Indian music luminaries on Wednesday paid tribute to the man who helped introduce the sitar to the Western world, Pandit Ravi Shankar, who died at the age of 92. A 3-time Grammy winner with legendary appearances at the 1967 Monterey Festival and Woodstock, Pandit Ravi Shankar had been in fragile health for several years.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates from us. This week, we wrap up with beautiful visuals from Paris, where the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral kicks off its 850th anniversary celebrations with an opening ceremony and a special mass. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.